Hello everybody and welcome to the second episode of 5 Red Lights, our new show about F1. This episode is following the Hungarian Grand Prix, and with me this week, as always, we have Mr. Anthony Cascud.
Hello!
Yes, I'm Jack Naven, and we'll move on to our race review of Hungary with obviously the top news that Daniel Ricciardo took his second win of the season in his career in a spectacular fashion.
It was a very good drive for him. Really, really good.
Yeah, I'd say better than his Canada one just because, that was amazing, but obviously the Mercs ran into trouble, whereas this was more him taking it.
Yeah, it was an outright battle, and that bit at the end between Alonso, Hamilton and Ricciardo was just brilliant. You genuinely didn't know who was going to win, but Ricciardo came out on top, and it was a good race.
Those moves on Hamilton and Alonso, they were pretty special, especially around Hungary.
Oh yeah. So moving on, Hamilton beats Rosberg from the pit lane. Team orders, yeah. And what's your opinion?
Well, it was a pretty good drive from Hamilton. I feel a bit sorry for Rosberg because all the strategy went against him. All the safety cars, he was running away with at the start. But still a great drive from Lewis. The team orders, I just think it was Mercedes were in the wrong to even put them in the first place. There shouldn't be team orders.
But it seemed like Mercedes were panicking a lot. They were worried they were losing the win and just weren't letting them fight it out between themselves. Yeah,
but the win. It's arguable if Rosberg could have beat Ricciardo, but really the win was lost from the safety and the strategy, which was out there, to an extent out of their hands. So really, the team orders probably didn't affect that in the end. Well, moving on from that, we'll move on to some sadder news. I say sadder, I'm not sure that's the right word, but Sauber still didn't get a point even in a crazy race like that, with lots of cars crashing out in the wet conditions. Adrian Sutil finished 11th, straight out of the points, and they're still behind Marussia at the moment.
Yeah, there's a problem there. They had a really good chance to finally get some points and go above Marussia this race, but it just never happened for them.
Yeah, it's I do wonder though. I do think that the car, it's not brilliant, but I do think that better drivers could have gotten to the points this season. So I think it's a question that Sauber need to ask about that.
Definitely.
So after the race in Hungary, still have Nico Rosberg in the lead of the championship by 11 points from Lewis Hamilton. And then a further 60 points back from Lewis. We have Ricciardo doing a very good season, and 16 behind him, Fernando from Bottas from Vettel, and then Hulkenberg doing a great job in 7th, close to by Jensen, and Felipe and Kevin Magnussen rounding out the top 10.
So moving on to our drivers of the week. For me, this one's really hard. There was a lot of good driving out there, and I'd say probably Ricciardo. As much as I want to say Hamilton, he did come from the pit lane and do a really good job, but I think Ricciardo was the man of the day for me.
I wouldn't even say Hamilton was really close for me. For me, it was between Alonso and Ricciardo, and I'd have to give it to Alonso just because, he was still in even more inferior equipment, and his strategy was probably the worst of them all because he had to make his tyres last for so long. And 2 laps to go, he was still in the lead. So I think that, not taking anything away from Ricciardo, he did a great job. But I think those two were quite a bit ahead of the rest of them.
Okay, so moving on to our weekly news. Caterham to be sued by their SAC staff. So this is an interesting development. I think we all kind of expected it to happen because they were very quiet on the reasons why they sacked the people. So, I think they've probably got a good case. What do you think?
Well, obviously it depends how tight their contracts are. There could be a lot of problems here because obviously the people who have come in and fired them were not the people who signed all the contracts with them when they hired them. So there might be plenty of stuff they have missed, and they've just thought, we'll save money by firing people, but they've not paid the proper compensation or whatever, and they could be in a lot of trouble here.
Well, overall, this is not good for Caterham, especially as they're trying to move on as a team. This isn't good for them, both from a PR perspective and as a team. If they are successfully sued, that's more money lost and more money taken away from the car for next year. So not really good times for Caterham.
Nope, not so. Well, moving on to apparently better times for Formula One, we shall have 2 new races upcoming. We shall have Mexico returning to the calendar, 2015, first time since 1992. And then in 2016, we have the Grand Prix of Europe, which is in the most European of countries, Azerbaijan.
It's good. I love new tracks. Mexico returning is fantastic. And yeah, Azerbaijan, it should be a good race. Interesting that it's going to be in 2016. Obviously, with Mexico returning, that kind of takes the calendar up to 21, unless they're thinking of getting rid of a race. And I know obviously there's a contract that they can only have 20 races per season, providing that the drivers don't come to a consensus that it's okay to have an extra race.
Well, of course, Mr. Eccleston's been saying that Monza might have a race in 2016, so that would be a stupid idea if Azerbaijan replaced Monza, but...
Yeah, well, Monza has such a history. It's one of the few tracks that remain, and you just can't get rid of it. You can't.
I think it's all just a negotiating ploy from Bernie. He does this all the time, but yeah, Azerbaijan, I'm not interested or excited at all, frankly. I think it'll be, just like Korea or India or any of those other failed races in those countries with lots of money. It doesn't live up to expectations. Mexico, the track seems to have been changed quite a bit and butchered quite a bit, so I'm not sure how it's going to be. But then again, I actually thought the same about Austria, and that ended up really liking the Red Bull ring layout of the track. So we'll see. Okay, so moving on now to the next piece of news. Daniel Ricciardo has said the championship is still in reach for him. I
think it's interesting that he said that. It's good because I like people to believe that they're not out. And I think it'll be add an interesting mix, especially if Red Bull get that car in front of Mercedes on a regular basis. It could give us a tight championship battle.
Yeah, it is interesting because in terms of the points, then the Mercs aren't as far ahead as you think, given their dominance. We've seen bigger gaps than this going to summer break from Vettel in 2011 and 2013, and the drivers have said even then they can catch up. But the problem, of course, now is that Hamilton and Rosberg have much faster cars than Vettel did in those cases, compared to the rest of them. So yeah, in terms of the points, it's doable. Realistically, I can't see anyone closing the gap enough to be a threat to them.
Well, I think it's a tough one. If you look at Hungary, the Mercedes were dropped back to a place where they shouldn't be, obviously because of what was going on in the race, and with the inter-team squabble, it could be a really good time for Ricciardo to make the most of it and give them a fight.
I think he'll make the most of it, but I really, I can't see him posing any real threats. He'll probably finish third in the championship, and that'll be fantastic for him. But I can't see any real threat being posed.
Well, moving on to other news. Vettel is to take Hamilton's seat in 2016. This seems like a very kind of plucked out of the air kind of.
It very much does. There seems to be no substantial evidence or anyone. There doesn't seem to be anything behind it. Really, it seems like it's just come out of thin air.
As far as I'm aware, they paid a lot of money for Hamilton. You wouldn't pay that much money for him if you weren't planning on keeping him on. He's, despite what's gone on, he's still obviously second in the drivers. They've just signed Rosberg. Why wouldn't you keep Hamilton on?
Well, I mean, here's the thing though. His contracts will run up by then. So they paid him a lot of money, and I think they're paying Hamilton in around 20 million a year. I think Vettel's getting 10 million a year at Red Bull, and I'm pretty sure Rosberg is only getting 10 or less at Mercedes. So Mercedes might be thinking with how well Rosberg's doing against Hamilton. I'm thinking, well, if we can get Vettel for 12, 13 million, then we can basically get Rosberg and Vettel for just a bit more than the price of Lewis Hamilton. And also, Rosberg, he does seem to get on with the team a bit more than Hamilton, and I mean, I don't think there's anything actually behind it. But I'm just, I'm just being devil's advocate here.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to speculate. I personally, though, I don't think it'll happen. I think Hamilton's probably going to be with Mercedes for the rest of his career. I think I don't think he plans on moving, and I don't think the team really plan on changing things up. I think they've got two really good drivers there. Why change that?
I think Lewis will be waiting to see how Honda do in their first season, and then he might make a move back to McLaren when his contract's up. But I really don't think it's a case of Mercedes will get rid of Lewis. I think it'll be if Lewis moves anywhere.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, from that tiny little discussion point, let's move on to our real discussion point of the week. And this week, because of course of what happened in Hungary between Nico and Lewis, we'll be talking about team orders. It's a tough one.
It is a tough one. I mean, it's not nice to see. As a fan of Formula 1, I can't understand it in a sense of it's just not entertaining for me. It takes away the joy of Formula 1. You know, I don't want to see the team telling Hamilton to let Rosberg pass. I want to see Rosberg get his own way past. You know, fight him. That's the point. It's about fighting each other. It's not about going, oh, could you tell him to pull over?
Yeah, it very much. It really, team orders, I think the way to fix them is just, you know, not to have them. But because, you know, obviously we're in danger of slipping back into the ridiculous days of Barrichello and Schumacher at Austria in 2002. And that was just taking it to the extreme with, you know, the last corner making give up the race. But of course, the problem with them banning team orders, as we saw in Germany in 2010 with Alonso and Massa, was that it was hard for them to enforce it. Because, you know, this call was Fernando was faster than you, and then Felipe seemed to slow down a bit, and Fernando went past. So officially, they did get fined for it, but officially they didn't really get punished for a team order, and that's when they made them legal again.
Well, that's put us in the position we are now, because obviously back then, everyone knew it happened. It wasn't necessarily legal, but it was frowned upon, so teams kept it quite hidden. Obviously, Ferrari messed up with that one and made it quite obvious, which then led us to team orders are allowed as long as it's public, and I think that's worse for me. I'd rather live in ignorance, not knowing that it's going on, even though it is, than to see it happening in front of me. I
disagree. I'd rather it happened in the open, because I hated all the crap they were spieling in the media about it not being this and that. Like, you know, you had after the race, like Massa being point blankly asked, you know, did he let Fernando pass? And he basically was just like dancing around the questions. Now, I'd rather have it out in the open. But I think it shouldn't be a case of making them illegal. But I just don't think teams should do them. Like Mercedes said at the beginning of the year, they wouldn't have team orders, and you know now it's happened.
Yeah. Okay, so we move on to our speculation section, and this week it's about Sauber. Nathan, what do you think Sauber's position is going to be at the end of this year?
You know, before this race, I would have said that they would have been able to get Marussia by the end of the year, because they clearly still do have a faster car than them by a significant amount. But you know, I think it's a driver problem now. I think it's a driver problem. I think that car can score points, but the drivers are not up to the scratch. And if you can, in a crazy race like that, score at least a point, then I don't see how they can beat Bianchi's 2 by the end of the year. I won't never say never, but I think it's unlikely.
I think I agree. I can't see Sauber challenging Marussia now. Like I said, they had their best chance this race, and they just, they ruined it. So going back to the drivers, do you think it's going to be a complete change for next season?
Well, I think Gutierrez came out this week and said that he will be at the team next season. When he's asked about Mexico, he said that he will definitely be there. And obviously there's a lot of Mexican money coming into the team from the Perez days even. So, I mean, I don't think Gutierrez is up to the scratch, but I think he probably will be there next year, sadly, because Sauber need the money. And I think they'll get rid of Suttel because, for all his experience and stuff, I mean, even last year at Force India, I think he did a bad job, and I think he's done a bad job this year. He's bringing in a little bit of money, but I don't think it's significant amounts to keep his seat.
Yeah, I think I agree. So, who do you think is a possibility of moving to Sauber next year?
Well, I think last week I was talking about Simona de Slentra, the IndyCar female driver, who I think a good shout. And I think also we cannot count out Guido van der Garde, who does bring in quite a bit of money. And I think Guido's a good driver, to be honest. I think that he's not obviously amazing, but I think he might be able to do a better job than Gutierrez or Sutter are doing, because he really got a lot out of the Caterham last year when he shouldn't have.
So, potential position next year, I mean, what are you thinking? Can they get past Marussia again, or can they go even higher than that?
I mean, I really saddens me to say this. I think Sauber are on a downward spiral. I think you can see that in a couple of years, Jordan went from, literally 2003 they won a race, and 2005 Eddie Jordan had to sell the team, and they would have scored no points that season if it wasn't for that race where in US where they had 6 cars. So it's a very downward spiral. Like teams that are really struggling for money like that. Sauber have had a lot of success the past couple of years, but they have been struggling for finance even through that. And I think they're going to be relying more on pay drivers. They lost a lot of key members of staff. James Key went to Toro Rosso, I think, maybe a year and a half ago, and a lot of other key staff members have been, poached by other teams. I sadly just think it's going to be a bit of a downward spiral for them. So
it's a shame to see, really. I mean, 2012 they almost won a race, and now they're finding it hard to complete races. It's just it's baffling, really. But I mean, do you think an extra sponsor to come in, like maybe if BMW took over them again, do you reckon that's possible for next year?
I don't think it'd be BMW. I think they're done for F1 for a long time now. Although I do see the idea of maybe like a takeover, because they still have that really expensive BMW wind tunnel, which is supposedly, when it was built, was the best wind tunnel facility in F1 and still might be. They have a lot of that BMW infrastructure from back in the day. So, I know Gene Haas keeps going on about, he wants to build it in America, he wants to build it in Charlotte, but you know what? There's like a lot of good facilities right there in the middle of Europe, waiting to be taken. Yeah, so just finally, we're going to, we didn't do this last week, because we had a lot of stuff last week, but we're going to be doing this every week now. We're going to be doing a community question each week, because we want to get you guys involved a bit more, see what you think about things, instead of just listening to us babble on and everything. Might get sick of our opinions and you want to say something. So each week we're going to ask questions to the community, and please leave your comments about your answer to this. So this week, because the big discussion point will be team orders going into the summer break, we're just going to ask, should team orders exist in F1? Should we go back to before Germany 2010 where they were banned, or should we keep it as it is where they're allowed?
Yes, so please leave a comment on what's your opinion on that, and we will see you next week. So goodbye for now.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.